Good morning, and thanks for being here. I am Mike Driscoll. I'm a data scientist, and I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Metamarkets. We've built a platform for real-time intelligence for programmatic exchanges and their buyers. Today, I'm going to be talking about some of the thorniest problems facing our industry. And after that, I'm going to bring up a couple of my guests, Adam Heimlich of Horizon Media, as well as Boykoff of A&E Networks, to continue the conversation. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of these thorny problems that are facing our industry. You know, programmatic, as evidenced by all of you gathered here today, has really been the child prodigy of the advertising world. But it's not without some of its warts. We've seen outright fraud. We've seen challenges with pages so loaded with ads that they're not even viewable. We've got problems with middlemen who are taking more than they give. And finally, of late, we've all seen the rise of ad blocking as a response to some of these challenges. Now, in my opinion, a lot of these problems come down to one root cause, and that is we really have trouble getting visibility into our programmatic markets. And there's a good reason for this. It turns out that programmatic data is some of the most massive data the world has ever seen. Programmatic data is 100 times larger than Wall Street. So take, for example, a day in August last month down the street, the New York Stock Exchange did 4 billion trades. On that same day, we estimate that on the programmatic markets, there were 400 billion daily transactions. What's more is that the metadata associated with every programmatic transaction is about 10 times as much as you'd see in a typical equity trade. So as we've seen with the world of finance, this kind of scale and complexity can really be a source of danger. In 2008, I think we all know that the world economy was almost cratered by some of the challenges we had with the use and abuse of complex mortgage derivatives. Now, the challenge there was the good guys couldn't see into the aggregates. They couldn't understand what was going on. I don't think that the world of programmatic is nearly in as dire a situation. I don't think we'll put the world economy at risk anytime soon. But I do think that increasingly we have been divorced from the ground truth of our data. So what we have here fundamentally is a problem of visibility, a lack of visibility. And I think this actually violates one of the core promises that we've made to ourselves in this programmatic era. In fact, we did a survey a few months back where we asked programmatic buyers how they get data from their partners. And we found out that 42% of programmatic buyers are still getting emailed spreadsheet attachments from their partners. This is 2005. I think it's time for us to come out of the dark ages when it comes to shedding light on the data that we receive from partners. And there's a great saying, I think, from 100 years ago. Supreme Court Justice Brandeis said that sunlight is the best disinfectant. The good news is that today we have tools to shed light on our programmatic data. We have a way to provide the granular visibility that marketers, our partners, ultimately the source of all of the checks that flow into our industry, are increasingly demanding and need. And we also have a way to move beyond the tyranny of averages and aggregates. This is why I started Metamarkets. As a data scientist, I was really interested in creating a platform that had 3 key features. First of all, it needed to be flexible. It needed to be able to slice and dice data a million different ways, fast. Second, it needed to be something that was easy and intuitive in a self-serve way for people to use. So anyone from the CEO to the summer intern should be able to use a tool to get visibility. And third, it needed to be collaborative. So today, we power tools for our clients that help 900 global partners of theirs get information through our dashboards. Now, whether or not you choose to use Metamarkets, I think you can agree that for programmatic to fulfill on its promise of growing up and becoming the type of industry that can be trusted, visibility is an essential ingredient. With that, I'm going to invite 2 of my guests, Adam and Lee. Please join me. Adam Heimlich of Horizon Media is the leader of the CRM and analytics function. Yep, there. Adam is the leader of the programmatic buying at Horizon. And then we've got Boykoff, who's also joining me. He is the head head of buying at A&E Networks. You run CRM and Programmatic there, and you guys have a global audience of over 400 million. So
and Lee is my client, don't forget.
And also, of course, you guys are friends and clients. You know, I thought we were listening this morning, and one of the things that Lee and Adam were talking about in the green room is that it's been a little bit of a very formal conference thus far. And so I thought I would maybe mix it up a little bit and start with a little bit of free association. There's a lot of buzzwords that we have in the world of programmatic. And I thought I would start by just saying a word and asking you to give me the first word that comes to mind. And I'll go through with each of you. So one of the things, of course, everyone's been talking a lot about is ad blocking. So Lee, when you hear ad blocking, what's the first word that comes to mind when you hear ad blocking?
Hurdle.
Adam?
Irrelevant.
Irrelevant. Okay.
Not the topic, the ad.
Okay, viewability. Lee?
Hurdle.
Adam?
DV.
DV. Okay, walled garden. Lee, when you hear walled garden, what do you think?
Nauseous.
Adam?
Google.
Google. Okay, cross-device identification. Adam, I'll put you first. What do you think when you hear cross-device identification?
Google again.
Lee?
Opportunity.
Opportunity.
There we go.
Okay, well, to get you guys sort of thinking a bit, I think we've got the creative juices flowing. I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about what we spoke before we came on stage here. Adam, you were talking about that the first wave of programmatic was all about scale and margin. And the opposite of light is shade. And you had said to me that there were some shady practices that you saw in the early world of programmatic. What's changed in this second wave? What's happening today that I guess gives you optimism for the future of this industry?
Right, so what's going on at Horizon is a good example. HX at Horizon that I lead is really the first agency trading desk that's 100% transparent. You could see the clearing price. You could see what data is added to your buy. You could see every site that you appeared on at what price. And we're optional within the agency. You could bake us off against an external programmatic buyer or even another agency's trading desk. And as we go into that ecosystem, right, the shadiness that you mentioned was very much a part of trying to set that up. Mm-hmm. Companies would come to me and say, hey, you don't have to lift a finger, just put our network in your trading desk, we'll cut you in on the margin. Mm-hmm. I said, no, actually, guys, I can't get away with that the way I'm doing this, but thank you for the offer. Then we found another set of partners who are operating in much similar ways, who want to show what their algorithm is doing. Mm-hmm. They want to implement with SSPs instead of operate as a network. And I would say that it's really growing in that. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a lot of clients likely who want to be involved and in charge of their data strategy. Mm-hmm. And I think that the open marketplace that was intended when RTB was engineered is really starting to stand up.
So one of the things we heard just before we came on stage, and Lee, you had me take a snapshot of the screen when the quote was up there from one of your colleagues over at A&E, was that increasingly publishers are working with multiple partners. And you're both on the sell side and the buy side at A&E Networks. I guess I'll go one step further and say, you know, a topic that some of you may have heard about, which is increasingly getting some traction, is this notion of header bidding. And it seems that header bidding might be another path for a publisher like A&E to work with multiple different SSPs. I guess the first question is, how many different partners are you guys monetizing with at A&E? And then how do you guys look at something like header bidding? Does that play into this overall strategy of diversifying your monetization channels?
So we're working with an array of partners. You know, our goal, we're thinking about how we can both protect the user experience and also how we can monetize our audience in a smart way. Mm-hmm. You know, most of our focus on the sell side is around video, and we don't expose our video in the public marketplaces, but we're happy to do PMP deals, and we do quite a few of them. The way that we think about programmatic on the sell side is not as a monetization vehicle for remnant or low quality or unsold inventory. We actually we have parity pricing between our direct sales channel and our programmatic sales channel. So any buyer who's out there that is willing to pay what we believe is fair value for our inventory, we welcome them to come into the programmatic channel. Mm-hmm. With respect to header bidding, I will not pretend to be the world's expert in that arena, but I will defer to Adam for his POV.
Let me actually do a survey. How many here have heard of header bidding? Raise your hand. Okay. How many here know what header bidding actually is? Okay, about half. I'm in the category that doesn't exactly know. Maybe Adam, do you want to tell us what header bidding means for you on the buy side, how you think of it?
Sure. Since I started naming names, I'll throw another one out. There's a company called Criteo that specializes in remarketing. So they're really the kings of this. I would say Criteo people have the best view of the header bidding landscape. It's a deal with publishers to have first look, to set up a tag above the auction. And it's really based on a flaw in the programmatic marketplace, right? That the previous presenter talked about, how the ad tech on the publisher side isn't really good enough to consider all deals at once simultaneously. So that flaw can sort of be exploited for an entity that has a lot of demand money and knows exactly what they want, right? They could go to publishers and say, we'll take a whole bunch of your inventory right off the top. We have an algorithm that'll decide what we want. If we want it, we'll give it to you for $1 or $2, right? So it's really in remarketing that's very extensive. I have a few clients who are obsessed with their remarketing reach, and the numbers are always disappointing of what you can reach. So you don't know how much of that is because of header bidding, but we believe it's a factor. Less of a factor if you're a brand advertiser, right? Because the header bidders in remarketing are after what I would consider the least incremental clicks and impressions, but.
So I guess, in one case, this is actually putting more power in the hands of the buyer and taking some power away from those intermediaries, whether they be the SSPs or folks like DFP.
To me, their greatest power is to sell every impression for the most they can get for it. So to me, it's not that.
Well, so it seems also it helps obviously publishers get fair value for their inventory.
It might be better than what they have now.
So on that note, I think Lee, one thing we were talking about was this trend of folks on the buy side taking their execution in-house. As someone on the buy side, tell us a little bit about how you guys are working both on the execution side and on the data side to maybe take more control of what you're doing with A&E.
Well, we believe strongly as marketers in the power of our first-party data. So we've invested heavily over the last few years in the collection and processing of that data. We build out a lot of segments, we do a lot of lookalike modeling, and then we pass that to Adam's team to activate. With respect to bringing programmatic in-house, it's something we've been hearing about for years. From my perspective, there's a bit of an arms race going on with respect to talent. And I'm overwhelmed. I think earlier we heard the Zipcar folks say that they were kind of overwhelmed when they saw the Loomascape and thinking about bringing things completely in-house. I'm overwhelmed thinking about trying to acquire top-notch talent. And so I'm happy to partner with folks that have expertise. I think Adam's team brings some transparency to the conversation. I can understand why a buyer who's working in an ecosystem with less transparency might think about bringing in-house. But for me, I'm pretty happy to own the data and then to partner on the execution side.
So to that question.
That's a great point. Don't let me miss a chance to tell my client he just made a great point.
Yeah, so that is a good point. So it seems
I appreciate your unbiased opinion.
So there's this distinction between maybe taking the data in-house versus taking the execution in-house. I guess, Adam, I've heard this again and again. We read a couple of years ago the headlines in Ad Age of American Express going 100% programmatic and P&G planning to go 80% programmatic in the coming years. I think you have told me that when we actually pull back the covers, we find that most of these folks are still, frankly, using agencies. So how do we think that through? What does taking programmatic in-house mean for you as an agency?
Well, I saw those moves as those companies putting pressure on their publishers to get serious about programmatic sales, and I think they were successful in that. There is not a premium publisher without a programmatic sales team now. But the talent war is very real. I'm glad you brought it up to remind me to say I'm hiring. If you're a programmatic buyer and you're here, you must be pretty good. If you're sick of ripping your clients off and want to have transparent pricing, please catch up with me. But what are we talking about?
So I guess I was asking about this distinction between taking one's data in-house.
Yeah.
So Lee is
Having control of your data is a great strategy. You have to think about what preceded this stage in programmatic. It was networks who would build a model of your converter and keep it behind a curtain, right? So that's a terrible model. So it's very smart for marketers to fix that, get control of their data, understand what lookalikes are being built off their audience, control those, understand where they're going, understand what tech is involved. As far as building a team like mine in-house, I haven't seen a lot of it. I wouldn't mind it. It'd be thousands more places that I could work, but I think a lot of that, something Lee pointed out backstage, is that a lot of something that DSPs really want to happen, and the people who are invested in DSPs really want to happen, that every marketer builds a team and licenses DSPs, but doesn't really seem to be the way it's going.
So there are a number of applications for the data outside of media buying. And so we use the data to personalize the user experience. We use the data on the sell side as well as on the buy side. The idea of outsourcing that data, it's not just that it's extremely valuable, but because it's used throughout multiple parts of our business, it simply wouldn't make sense for us to house that data and have it owned by a third party.
So, Lee, when you guys are working and managing buys inside of walled gardens, tell me, how difficult have you found it to bring your own data to bear on some of these larger walled gardens that are emerging, and what do you see happening in the next 12 to 18 months to make that change?
So there's two challenges with respect to the walled gardens. There's taking first-party marketer data and putting it into the ecosystem, and then there's getting data back out of the ecosystem. I think there's been some nice movement in the last few months with respect to marketers being able to bring their first-party data into the walled garden ecosystem, and I applaud those that were involved in those changes. But we're really still having a lot of issues getting data back out. And so we focus quite a bit on an attribution model that we've built, somewhat proprietary. And the walled gardens that aren't allowing us to run those attribution models against their media are honestly losing our dollars. So some of the gardens that have extensive audience and share of inventory we're still going to work with, but we're really moving dollars where we can out of those walled garden environments and into the more open inventory ecosystems.
So to be specific, does that mean you're spending less on Facebook?
That's possible.
I guess, Adam, what is your perspective as a major buyer? How are you guys contending with some of these dynamics that we're seeing emerge with some of the major players who've got walled gardens?
Yeah, I tell clients who have a first-party data strategy, it's really smart. Unfortunately, you really need to think about it in terms of Google, Facebook, programmatic right now. If you want that to change and you want more in that one pillar, stop buying so much Google Direct, stop buying so much Facebook where you can't get your data out. And those companies have programmatic as a plan B, right? I invite any marketers as an experiment, tell your Google AE you want to buy more programmatic, you'll get a DBM AE in the next day saying, yeah, we have that too. It's lower margin for them, but they're ready to sell that way as well.
So ad blocking, I know we did word association earlier. Of course, this is something that is all the talk of the town, of the programmatic town. Fundamentally, Lee, what do you see as the impact, if at all, of ad blocking on A&E as both a seller and as a buyer?
So ad blocking doesn't impact all platforms equally. Today, we believe that inventory in the mobile web ecosystem is at significant risk. Desktop inventory is at moderate risk, and the app ecosystem, not much risk at all. At least that's how the world looks today. As sellers, most of our inventory on the video side is actually in our mobile apps and our over-the-top apps. And it's amazing to see how the eyeballs have moved over the last few years. If you're a buyer and you're not thinking about how to buy inventory on Roku or Apple TV, and certainly in the iOS and Android app ecosystem, you really should be. So we feel somewhat protected in that sense. As a buyer, I see ad blocking as an obstacle. We define a target audience. We want to reach that audience. And to the extent that the audience tunes out of our messaging, that's a problem. And I'm going to be curious to see how the industry deals with it.
So, Adam, you're obviously on the buy side. One of the things we're hearing is that it's less of an issue, ad blocking, in terms of the in-app mobile ecosystem. It seems, from all of the research, of course, of the last several months, that despite the fact that audiences are spending so much time in apps on mobile devices, the spend is still lagging there. Do you see ad blocking as actually potentially driving spend into the in-app ecosystem, or how do you see this?
Maybe we can't
working?
really track the impact of blocking on our ability to reach consumers, so it's hard to have a strategy against it, right? It's only just a theory. A mobile app is a tough environment because of the tracking difficulties. Ad blocking is really just an extension of the way mobile has been so tough over the past few years that it's very hard to track, very hard to see what's going on, very hard to have control of your ad experience. But I'll say that the programmatic publisher marketplace has been good at policing itself and good at cleaning itself up. I think just in the way that programmatic services have evolved from the shady practices of the first wave of trading desks, publishers will evolve from really bad programmatic ad experiences that screw up your browsing experience to the better ones that are relevant and help consumers feel like, hey, this is supporting the free web. It's not something that's just killing me.
So we'll end on one question, one last word association. So as we look out to 2016 and think about what we might all be talking about when we get together for Programmatic I/O in New York next year, one word, Lee, what would you think would be the topic we'll be discussing a year from now?
We're still going to be talking about cross-device user identification.
Great.
Yeah.
Adam.
I think we're going to see a winnowing of companies, and we're going to talk there's going to be a perception that the marketplace is faltering because some companies are going to go out of business, but it'll be a good thing.
All right, creative destruction and cross-device identification as two topics. Thank you guys for both joining me. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you guys.